What if the person you trusted most in the world turned out to be a complete stranger wearing a familiar face? What would you do if you walked into a hospital room and discovered that your entire life was a carefully constructed lie? Before you keep listening, I need you to do something for me. Like this video, share it with someone you trust, and subscribe to Voices of Auntie Belle because your support means everything to us. We absolutely love hearing from our listeners all around the world. So tell us, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. We read them all and we truly appreciate you. Now let me tell you about Christine. Christine Johnson was a woman who believed in showing up. For 32 years, she had shown up for everyone. As a nurse at County Hospital, she showed up through double shifts and triple shifts, through holidays and emergencies. She held the hands of dying patients. She comforted families in their darkest moments. She was the kind of nurse people asked for by name. But the person she showed up for most was her husband, Corey Williams. They had been married for 12 years, and Christine had learned to make herself smaller and quieter to fit into the spaces Corey left for her. It started small, the way most betrayals do. A few late nights at the office that became more frequent. A phone that buzzed constantly but was always turned face down. A wedding ring that sometimes felt heavier than it should. Christine was a smart woman. She noticed everything. But she told herself stories instead. She told herself that Corey was stressed about work. She told herself that successful men often worked late. She told herself that the distance between them was temporary, something they would fix when things settled down. But things never settled down. They only got worse. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in March when Christine arrived at the hospital for her shift and heard through the grapevine about a young woman named Lakeisha Williams who had been admitted to the cardiac unit. Christine didn't think much about it until she heard that Corey had called the hospital personally to make sure Lakeisha received the best care possible. That was unusual. That was very unusual. Corey had never called about anything related to Christine's work. He never asked which patient she was caring for or how her day had gone. But he called about a stranger named Lakeisha Williams. Christine's stomach twisted. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself there was probably a simple explanation. But the nurse in her, the woman who had learned to read people's vital signs and understand what they were really saying underneath their words, knew something was terribly wrong. She found Lakeisha's room on the 3rd floor. Before she opened the door, Christine took a breath and held it, as if she could pause time itself and make what she was about to discover untrue. But time doesn't stop. Doors open. Truth has a way of forcing itself into the light. What Christine saw in that room shattered her like glass. Corey was sitting beside Lakeisha's hospital bed, holding her hand. That alone would have been devastating. But it was the details that broke Christine's heart into pieces so small she didn't know if she could ever glue them back together. Corey was wearing the anniversary watch. The watch that Christine had given him on their 10th anniversary. The watch he said he only wore on special occasions. He was leaning over Lakeisha with a tenderness that Christine hadn't felt directed at her in years. His voice was soft and warm as he promised Lakeisha that he would take care of everything, that she didn't need to worry about a single thing, that he was here now and he would never leave her alone. Christine felt the world tilt. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself, but nothing could steady this. Nothing could make sense of what she was witnessing. Lakeisha was young, probably in her late 20s, with dark eyes and smooth skin. She looked vulnerable in the hospital bed, but she also looked like someone who had never known a day of worry in her life. She looked at Corey with complete devotion, the way Christine used to look at him. The way she had stopped looking at him somewhere between the lies and the silence. Corey said something that made Lakeisha laugh, and that laugh cracked something open inside Christine. It was a sound of joy and safety and love. A sound that belonged to someone who believed they were being taken care of. A sound that Christine recognized because she used to make that sound too. That's when Christine did something that surprised even herself. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't burst into the room and demand answers. Instead, she turned around and walked back down the hallway. She walked past the nurse's station. She walked down the stairs. She walked out to her car, and she sat in the driver's seat in silence. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. But underneath all of that was something else. Something cold and clear and determined. A part of Christine that had been dormant for years suddenly woke up. She realized in that moment that this wasn't just an affair. This was something else entirely. This was planned. This was calculated. This was a man living two separate lives, and Christine was finally going to understand why. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Her sister Maya answered on the second ring. Maya was a private investigator, the kind of woman who knew how to find out what people wanted to keep hidden. Christine didn't say hello. She didn't ask how Maya was or make small talk. She simply said one sentence. "I need your help. I think my husband is trying to destroy me." And that's when everything changed. Maya arrived at Christine's house within an hour. She came through the door like a hurricane, ready for battle. Maya was the opposite of Christine in almost every way. Where Christine was soft, Maya was sharp. Where Christine had learned to make excuses, Maya had learned to find the truth. She was taller than Christine, with braids pulled back from her face and eyes that missed nothing. Christine had already pulled out a folder. Inside were the pieces of the puzzle she had been collecting without even realizing it. Bank statements printed from the computer when Corey wasn't looking. A credit card bill that arrived at a P.O. box. Receipts for jewelry stores. Plane tickets to a city 3 hours away from where they lived. Text messages on a phone she found hidden in the garage. As Christine laid everything out on the kitchen table, Maya's jaw got tighter and tighter. But Maya needed more than scattered pieces. She needed a complete picture. She told Christine that what they were looking at wasn't just an affair. An affair was bad enough, but this was something darker. This was a plan. This was a scheme. And if Corey was willing to carry out this kind of scheme, he must have a reason. He must have something he wanted. Maya started asking questions. Had Corey ever suggested that Christine was forgetful? Had he ever mentioned that she seemed confused or tired or like she wasn't taking care of herself properly? Had he ever talked about Christine needing help with her finances or her decisions? And with every question, Christine felt her blood run colder and colder. She realized that yes, he had been saying those things. He had been mentioning them more and more. Just last month, he had suggested to her sister that Christine needed to see a doctor about her memory. He had told his mother that Christine seemed depressed and wasn't herself lately. He had been building a story. A story about a woman who was losing her mind. A story that would justify him taking control of her bank account, her house, her life. This wasn't an affair. This was theft. This was the slow, careful theft of Christine's entire existence. Maya made phone calls. She contacted her network of investigators and sources. She filed requests for financial records. She obtained surveillance footage from banks and credit card companies. What emerged over the next 2 weeks was almost too terrible to comprehend. Corey had opened a second bank account. He had been systematically transferring money from the joint account they shared into this hidden account. Over 3 years, he had moved more than $200,000. $200,000 that Christine had earned through countless night shifts and weekends away from home. The money was being used to pay for an apartment. Not one apartment. 2 apartments. One for him and one for Lakeisha. He had furnished them both. He had paid for Lakeisha's medical school tuition, which is why she had been hospitalized with cardiac stress in the first place. Stress from school. Stress that Corey was helping her manage by positioning himself as her devoted caregiver and soon-to-be fiancé. There was more. So much more. Corey had been gathering documents. Birth certificates, medical records, financial statements. Documents that proved Christine's access to money and property. He had started the process of establishing himself as Christine's medical power of attorney. He had consulted with an attorney about guardianship laws. If he could convince a judge that Christine was mentally incompetent, he could take control of everything. Her nursing license. Her bank accounts. Her house. Her life. Lakeisha would become his fiancée, his partner in crime, and Christine would become invisible. Just a woman in a hospital somewhere. Someone who used to matter but didn't anymore. Maya discovered that Lakeisha knew about Christine. Corey had told her lies. He had told her that Christine was his ex-wife, someone from his past who didn't matter anymore. He had told her that he was already divorced. He had told her that Christine was unstable and that he was trying to keep her away from his new life because she had become dangerous. He had made Christine into the villain in a story that was really about his own betrayal. Christine sat in her kitchen and cried when she learned this. Not because her husband had cheated on her. Not because he had stolen her money. She cried because he had systematically set about erasing her from existence. He had taken her love and her loyalty and her sacrifice, and he had used them as raw materials to build his own lie. But Maya wasn't done. She had one more revelation, and this one was the key to everything. Lakeisha had left her own trail. She had sent Corey text messages. Hundreds of them. In those messages, she talked about the plan. She talked about the timeline. She talked about how long they thought it would take before Christine was declared incompetent. They had set a date. 6 months. They thought they could do it in 6 months. And then they would be free. Free from Christine. Free from the truth. Free to live the life they had built on lies. Christine looked at the messages on Maya's laptop, and something inside her shifted. The frightened woman who had been trying to hold her marriage together, who had been trying to make excuses for her husband's distance, who had been willing to sacrifice her own peace for the sake of staying married. That woman disappeared. In her place was someone else. Someone who had been hurt but was no longer willing to suffer in silence. Someone who understood that real love couldn't exist where there was no honesty. Someone who was ready to fight back. Christine and Maya devised a plan. It was careful and methodical. Christine would go home and act normal. She would. But she could do it. Because now she knew the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful it was better than any comfortable lie. Go to work. She would come home from work. She would pretend that she still believed in her marriage. She would pretend that she didn't know anything. And while she pretended, they would gather one final piece of evidence. Video. Audio. Proof that Corey would have to admit to because there would be no way to deny it. 2 weeks later, Christine invited Corey to dinner. She cooked his favorite meal. She set the table with nice dishes. She asked him about his day at work. She was the perfect wife, the devoted woman he had always counted on. And Corey, believing that Christine was still the same person she had always been, relaxed. He believed he had gotten away with it. That night, Christine asked him point blank. She asked him if there was someone else. She asked him if he had been meeting someone in another city. She asked him if he was planning to leave her. And because Corey thought Christine was weak, because he thought she was already breaking down under the weight of his carefully planted suggestions about her mental state, he told her the truth. He told her everything. He told her about Lakeisha. He told her about the apartment. He told her about how tired he was of their marriage, how Lakeisha understood him in ways Christine never could. He told her about the guardianship plan, but he wrapped it in gentle language. He called it protection. He called it care. He said it was because Christine wasn't capable anymore of managing her own life. He said it with such certainty, such complete belief in his own version of the story, that Christine felt almost dizzy. What Corey didn't know was that every word was being recorded. Every admission was being captured. Maya was in the other room, recording every detail on a high-quality audio device. And tomorrow, Christine's attorney would have exactly what she needed to destroy her husband's case before it ever got to a courtroom. Christine had one more night to pretend. One more night to sit across from the man she had devoted 12 years to, knowing that he had been planning to erase her. One more night to act like her world wasn't about to explode into 1,000 pieces. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday night at a restaurant called Meridian's, the kind of place where they used to celebrate anniversaries before those celebrations stopped feeling real. Christine invited Corey's mother, his brother, and his best friend. She invited her own sister Maya. She invited 2 of Corey's colleagues from work. She made sure there would be witnesses. She made sure there would be people who cared about the truth. When everyone arrived, they sat at a large round table draped in white cloth. The restaurant manager had been informed ahead of time about what was going to happen. They had agreed to give Christine and her family privacy in a private dining room. Corey didn't suspect anything. He showed up in a nice suit, smiling, charming everyone the way he always did. He kissed Christine on the cheek when he sat down. He told her she looked beautiful. He had no idea that his entire world was about to come crashing down. Christine waited until after the appetizers were served. Then she stood up. The room went quiet. Everyone looked at her, wondering what was happening. Corey looked confused. He said her name like it was a question. Christine didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a button on her phone, and the audio started playing through the speakers. It was Corey's voice, clear and unmistakable. Corey admitting to everything. Corey talking about Lakeisha with tenderness and promise. Corey discussing the guardianship plan. Corey calling Christine weak and incompetent. Corey saying that he had already started the paperwork. Corey saying that in 6 months, Christine would be declared unfit to manage her own life, and then he and Lakeisha would have everything. The restaurant fell silent except for the sound of Corey's own voice betraying him. When the audio finished, Christine brought out the documents. Bank statements. The hidden account. The transfer records. The apartment leases in both names. The text messages between Corey and Lakeisha planning every detail of the scheme. The receipts for jewelry that had never been given to Christine. The medical records showing that Lakeisha had been hospitalized not because of a serious condition but because of stress from school, stress that Corey had encouraged her to experience so he could play the role of devoted caregiver. Corey's mother gasped. His brother's face turned red with anger. His best friend stood up and walked away from the table without saying a word. Corey's colleagues looked at him with disgust. And Christine, standing at the head of the table, looked at her husband with the kind of clarity that only comes after all the illusions have been stripped away. Corey tried to defend himself. He said that Christine had always been cold. He said that Lakeisha understood him. He said that the money was his to use however he wanted. He said that Christine was exaggerating the guardianship thing, that it was just something he had been thinking about, not something he was actually going to do. But his own recorded voice had already told the truth. There was nowhere for him to hide. Christine's attorney was waiting outside the restaurant. She had already filed the divorce papers. She had already filed a report with the police about the financial fraud. She had already contacted the state medical board about Corey's attempt to obtain fraudulent guardianship. Within hours, Corey would be arrested. Within days, he would be charged. Within months, he would stand in front of a judge and answer for what he had done. But before all of that happened, Christine did something that surprised everyone. She called Lakeisha. She called her and told her the truth. She told her that Corey had lied about Christine being his ex-wife. She told her about the guardianship scheme. She told her that Lakeisha was being used, just like Christine had been used. And she offered to help her. Lakeisha didn't believe her at first. But then Christine sent her the recordings, the documents, the proof. And slowly, Lakeisha began to understand that the man she thought loved her had been using her as a tool in a larger conspiracy. Lakeisha agreed to testify against Corey. She agreed to share the text messages they had exchanged where they discussed erasing Christine. And in doing so, she became an unlikely ally in Christine's fight for justice. The trial took 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Corey's attorney tried to argue that he had been under emotional stress, that he had made mistakes, that he didn't mean any of it. But the judge wasn't interested in excuses. The judge looked at a man who had systematically plotted to steal his wife's life, her money, her identity, and the judge sentenced him accordingly. Guilty on all counts. 3 years in prison. Restitution to Christine in the full amount of $200,000 plus interest. The loss of his professional license. A restraining order that would keep him away from Christine for the rest of her life. Christine didn't celebrate when the verdict came down. Instead, she felt something close to peace. Not happiness, because what had happened had hurt her in ways that would take years to heal. But peace, because she finally knew the truth. And the truth meant that she could begin the process of rebuilding. She returned to her job at County Hospital as Christine Jones, her maiden name. She requested the night shifts that she had been avoiding, the shifts where she could help people in their most vulnerable moments. She had learned something through this ordeal that made her better at her job. She had learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we trust the most. She had learned to listen to her instincts even when they contradicted what someone was telling her. She had learned that real love, true love, requires honesty and respect and daily commitment. It isn't just about endurance. It isn't just about staying in a situation because it's familiar or comfortable. Lakeisha went on to complete her medical degree. She became a doctor, and she spent her career helping people who had been manipulated and abused. She became an advocate for people in Christine's situation. And every time she helped someone, she thought about Christine's kindness in reaching out to her, in offering her the truth when the truth was the last thing she wanted to hear. Christine's sister Maya expanded her investigative practice. She began specializing in cases of financial fraud and emotional manipulation. She wanted to help other women who had been betrayed the way Christine had been betrayed. She wanted to make sure that other Coreys couldn't hide in the shadows anymore. A year after the trial ended, Christine had dinner with Lakeisha. It was strange and awkward at first. They had both been used by the same man, and that created a strange bond between them. But as they talked, They realized that they had both been victims of the same carefully constructed lie. And in acknowledging that, they found a kind of healing. Christine told Lakeisha that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about refusing to let what had happened define the rest of her life. Forgiveness was about choosing to move forward, to build something new, to reclaim the parts of herself that had been stolen. Lakeisha asked Christine how she had known what to do. How had she known to gather evidence instead of just confronting Corey? How had she known that her instincts were right? And Christine thought about all those moments she had ignored her gut feeling. All those times she had made excuses for behavior that didn't add up. All those instances when she had told herself that she was being paranoid or too sensitive. She told Lakeisha that she had learned the hard way that your instincts are trying to protect you. When something feels wrong, it usually is. When a story doesn't add up, it's because you're being lied to. When someone is making you feel small or uncertain about your own mind, that's not love. That's manipulation. And the only way to protect yourself is to trust yourself more than you trust the person telling you that you can't trust yourself. Christine's final words of wisdom were these. She said that in every relationship, there's a moment when you have to decide whether to stay comfortable or start seeking the truth. There's a moment when you have to choose between protecting someone else's secrets and protecting your own peace. There's a moment when you have to decide if real love exists in this situation, or if you've been holding on to a beautiful illusion. For Christine, that moment came in a hospital room when she saw her husband holding another woman's hand wearing Christine's anniversary watch. But for many people, that moment never comes until it's too late. The lesson Christine wanted to share was this. Don't wait for the devastating moment. Trust your instincts now. Safeguard your peace today. Seek the truth before it seeks you. Because real love requires honesty. Real partnership requires respect. And you deserve nothing less than a relationship built on truth. If you're listening to this story right now, and something in your life doesn't feel right, listen to that feeling. Talk to someone you trust. Ask the hard questions. Gather your own evidence. Don't make excuses for behavior that doesn't deserve excuses. And remember that leaving a situation that's hurting you isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you can possibly do. Thank you so much for listening to Christine's story all the way to the end. Your support means the world to us here at Voices of Auntie Belle. Before you go, I need you to do something important. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. It might be someone going through exactly what Christine went through. It might be someone who needs permission to trust their instincts. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Belle so you never miss a story. And please, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. We read every single comment and we absolutely love hearing from you. We want to know your stories too. Maybe someday, we'll get to tell your story to the world. Until then, stay safe, stay true to yourself, and remember that you are worth so much more than the lies someone else is willing to tell you. Thank you for being part of our Voices of Auntie Belle family.